Welcome to our kitchen. In these days, Andrea is sick and completely voiceless, so I am substituting him. Usually, I work on the other side of the camera, but this time I will present to you our new ancient Roman recipe. Delicious meatballs wrapped in caul fat and cooked in a very interesting way. We start with the ingredients. We need pork tenderloin, caul fat, grapes, a bit of bread, pine nuts, garum, we talk later about it, red wine and the spices, black pepper and myrtle berries. First, we soak the bread without crust in red wine. Then we grind in the mortar a bit of black pepper and one myrtle berry. We don't need too much pepper now because we'll also add all pepper grains in the meatballs. Myrtle berries were widely used in ancient Rome to season food as well as to produce myrtle oil and many kinds of myrtle wines. Pliny reports that before the introduction of pepper, myrtle berries were used in the same way as pepper. In the cookbook conventionally attributed to Apicius, there are several recipes with myrtle berries and also one with myrtle wine. Now we mince the meat. The author doesn't tell us what kind of meat to use, just to use lean meat. But in another passage of his cookbook, he lists the meat he used to make meatballs: peacock, pheasant, rabbit, chicken and pork. However, we know from other sources that meatballs were made also with other meats. For example, in the Edit of Prices of Emperor Diocletianus, issued at the beginning of the 4th century of the Common Era, we find both pork and beef meatballs. It's interesting to note that meatballs were also sold already prepared by butchers, and that beef meatballs costed less than pork meatballs. But it's not surprising, considering that in the edict beef cost less than pork. We pound the pork tenderloin in the mortar. This recipe is part of the cookbook conventionally attributed to Apicius. The name of the recipe is Isicia Omentata, that can be translated as meatballs with caul fat. Indeed, caul fat is a key ingredient for this recipe. The meatballs are made with a lean meat, and there are no other fats in the recipe, not even oil to cook them. Wrapping the meatballs in caul fat adds a uniform and well-distributed layer of flavorful fat that will gradually melt during the cooking, keeping the meatballs moist and tender and adding a lot of flavor. We mix together the meat, the spices, a bit of garum and the bread soaked in wine. Garum was an ancient Mediterranean fish sauce, widely used by ancient Romans, Greeks, and Phoenicians. It was made with fish and salt, sometimes adding aromatic herbs and spices. Some types of garum were made in the same way as modern-day Southeast Asian fish sauces. In this recipe, the author lists garum as an optional ingredient. We suggest to use it. It will add more flavor to the meatballs. You can substitute it with a Southeast Asian fish sauce, or, if you prefer, just 2 pinches of salt. Then we add all pepper grains and pine nuts. The author uses all pepper grains and pine nuts also in a smoked sausage called lucanica. You'll find the link to the lucanica recipe at the end of this video. We paired the Lucanica with 2 ancient Roman mustards that are perfect also with these meatballs. Now we cut the caul fat. The pieces must be wide enough to wrap the meatballs, but you don't need too much precision. As you see, you can also stretch it a bit to cover all the meatball surface. We shape the meatballs and wrap them in caul fat. The author tells us to make pusilla Isicia, that means little meatballs. But don't make them too little, or the whole pine nuts will cause them to break apart while you'll cook them. Now we crush the grapes to prepare the carenum. Carenum is one of the grape must reduction used in ancient Roman cuisine. 4th century agronomist Palladius describes carenum as grape must reduced to 2/3 of the original volume. These kinds of products weren't made at home, but in the ville, ancient Roman farms. The cooks bought grape must reduction already prepared. In addition to carenum, there were available also the frutum, grape must reduced to a half, and sapa reduced to 1/3. Now we cook the grape juice until it reduces to 2/3. We don't want it to reduce too much. The aim is to give just a slight sweetness to the meatballs. If we cook it for too long now, it will caramelize before the meatballs will finish cooking. We add the meatballs and cook them for a few minutes, turning them a couple of times. The cooking time can change considerably, depending on the size of the meatballs and the cut of meat you choose. If the carenum reduces too much while you cook the meatballs, add a bit of water to prevent it from caramelizing. We infer that this was not the aim of the author. Otherwise, he would have used a grape must with higher concentration, such as sapa or the frutum. We serve the meatballs, pouring a bit of the carenum in which we cook them. This flavorful and well-balanced dish is a delicious example of the many kinds of meatballs, sausages, and other similar preparations that ancient Romans used to eat. If you're interested in ancient food and flavors, or you're just looking for unusual and delicious recipes, please subscribe our channel.